Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking a journey far from the sunny hills of California.
Oh, yeah.
We are planting ourselves firmly in the concrete jungle, New York City, because we're unlocking the origin story of the East Coast's true calling card, sour diesel.
It really is the one.
For so long, the whole narrative was dominated by the West Coast, the OG wave, but sour D was the strain that really punched back.
It had to.
It was the genetic line that, by the 2000s, proved NYC could compete with anybody. I mean, it achieved these incredible, almost mythical prices.
We're talking about those legendary $500 zips.
Exactly. And it secured global fame. High Times officially ranked it the #3 greatest strain of all time back in 2018.
Which is huge.
So our mission today is to give you the shortcut to understanding this legend. We are going to unpack the deep lore, the incredibly complex and often conflicted genealogy.
It is definitely conflicted.
And we're going to meet the key players who turned a few exchange seeds into, well, a worldwide superstar.
And that conflicted genealogy is really what makes this story so compelling. Like you said, pinning down the exact moment of genesis is nearly impossible.
Right.
But the sources give us a roadmap. The narrative really hinges on these specific geographic anchors and personal connections. It's a story that's rooted in, NYC, Staten Island, and the critical distribution pipelines that ran out of Albany.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To really appreciate sour diesel, you have to start with the true foundational blueprint. We have to trace the genetics all the way back to 1992.
And it starts with one thing.
The essential starting piece of this puzzle is Chem Dog 1991.
Absolutely. And the cornerstone role in bringing that DNA to the East Coast belongs to a grower named Mike Klopp. Mike the Weasel Klopp.
The Weasel, right?
He was a NYC Staten Island fixture, and he was connected directly into Chem Dog's inner circle. His actions are really what set the entire stage.
The Weasel's trips in the early 90s were absolutely crucial. The sources tell us he brought 2 critical genetics back east, that Chem Dog 1991 we mentioned, and a line referred to simply as Massachusetts Super Skunk.
Or MSS.
MSS, yeah. And he didn't stop there. I mean, this was the era where East Coast growers were hungry to prove they could play on the same field as everyone else.
They had something to prove. Weasel traveled to Amsterdam, saw Adam Dunn's legendary Silver Pearl, and he came back with these high-end Sensi seed packs.
What was in them?
Notably, Northern Lights, #5, Super Skunk, Oasis, and a Hawaiian Indica. Just a treasure trove.
So from this incredible palette of genetics, he basically constructed what became known as the original diesel, or OD.
And the main formula you see cited in the lore is that Chem Dog 1991 crossed with, well, a hybrid of Massachusetts Super Skunk and Northern Lights.
It's important to note, though, the complexity starts right here at the foundation. There's an alternative version floating around that simplifies it to just Chem Dog 91 crossed with Northern Lights.
Right. But either way, that 1991 Chem Dog was the undisputed essential backbone, no question.
And what's fascinating is that even this original diesel, this genetic foundation, had multiple confusing aliases. Before it became the singular name we all know, that OD cut was also being called Daywrecker.
Headband?
And Underdog, all the same time.
That multiplicity of names is just a hallmark of an underground market. Names didn't stick. They were regional. They were tactical. You can immediately see why tracing the final sour diesel lineage is such a chaotic task.
Oh, for sure.
The foundation itself was being called 3 or 4 different things, depending on who you talk to.
Right. And this brings us to this crucial cultural shift that happens next, the NYC slang flip. This is the moment between 93 and 95 when the name diesel becomes locked into the East Coast lexicon.
So Chem 91 was starting to flood NYC.
And a pivotal crew led by a player known as JJ decided they needed a better name for this top-shelf product.
And the sources explain their logic perfectly. They started calling it diesel because in that era of NYC slang, diesel just meant high octane, top shelf.
Quality.
They felt chem sounded too much like, well, chemicals or something synthetic. By calling it diesel, they were basically giving it a compliment.
They flipped the script, the label stuck in city slang, and that cultural rebranding is arguably as important as the genetics themselves.
It absolutely is.
Because that is what set the stage for the specific strain we now call sour diesel. It moved from being just a product name to an identity.
It's a brilliant example of how localized culture can change the destiny of a name globally. but it creates this massive confusion because for a while in New York, the word diesel just referred loosely to the entire Chem 91 family and its crosses.
Not one specific cut.
Exactly.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the history turns into a true detective story. We have two primary and very different claims about the precise moment the sour diesel seed actually popped.
This is the real mystery.
This is the core aha moment for you, the listener, because it forces you to decide what you believe in, controlled breeding or just happy accidents.
And the sources lay out these two competing creation stories, and they are, diametrically opposed in terms of intent.
Okay, so claim number one. This is attributed primarily to JJ's camp, and it describes the origin as a classic series of mistakes.
A happy accident, basically.
Right. So the narrative suggests a Chem 91 bag seed, a seed found unintentionally in a bag, was grown out. This plant was likely pollinated by the MSS, the Massachusetts Super Skunk.
Okay.
Now here is the crucial next step. That resulting plant was then likely hit by RFK skunk pollen, which produced a new seed.
A third-generation seed.
That seed is the one they claim was ultimately popped and became the singular legendary cut of sour diesel.
So it's just chaos, it's chance, and you have to remember the context you just gave us.
Yeah.
During the 90s, Diesel, Headband, Daywrecker, they were all just loose, interchangeable street names for Chem 91.
Yeah.
The labeling was all over the map.
It makes me wonder if the genesis is that complicated, this three-way accidental cross with a bag seed. Doesn't that fundamentally diminish the work of the original breeder, the Weasel?
That's the tension.
Yeah.
That is the tension at the heart of the lore. And Weasel is definitely claim number two. He positions himself as the backdrop, the guy who provided the genetics.
He brought the pieces to the board.
He readily acknowledged the later seeded diesel run that produced the seeds popped by the Albany Crew. But crucially, he never claimed the resulting keeper cut, the East Coast sour diesel itself.
Okay, so if we synthesize those two claims, the controversy seems to boil down to that one seeded run of Chem 91. Was it a targeted backcross by the original breeder, or was it that RFK Skunk accident that gave us the final sour D?
And the sources don't give us a definitive, signed and notarized answer. That's often the case with these legends. But it does offer critical context.
Which is what?
It encourages us to look past controlled science and consider how often foundational strains, the real game changers, arise from happy accidents, from contamination, or just pure chaotic luck.
Not a deliberate breeding program.
Exactly. And Sour Diesel's story leans heavily toward that chaotic luck, which, ironically, is a huge part of its appeal.
So once that legendary keeper seed finally popped, the challenge shifted. It wasn't about creation anymore.
No, it was about distribution.
That brings us to the kingmakers, the people who moved diesel from a local NYC thing to East Coast dominance. And we absolutely have to introduce the Albany Crew.
The 518 engine.
The 518 engine from the mid-90s onward.
The sources highlight that this crew was the essential backbone of the strain's commercial rise. They were the upstate players who controlled the flow of those early diesel cuts. The brilliance of the 518 engine was purely logistical.
How so?
They strategically linked NYC, where the demand and the lore originated, to these key high-demand markets upstate and beyond.
And they solved a logistical challenge, right? The city is hot, it's expensive, and it's risky for large-scale operations.
Exactly. They solved the supply chain problem. They used the geography of upstate New York, which offered cheaper, more discrete growing spaces to scale production. And then they linked directly into college towns like Syracuse and the lucrative New England markets, especially Vermont.
So that network was the engine.
It was the engine that pushed diesel into becoming the defining strain of the entire East Coast scene.
And this rapid scaling is where a pivotal figure named AJ steps into the story around 1995. He gets the cuts through the Albany network and becomes really the great curator of the line.
Right. AJ first acquired what was known as the less desired number 2 cut. But later, through a favor, via a contact named Vondo, he got his hands on the highly sought-after number 1 cut.
And that number 1 cut.
That became legendary, became known as AJ's Sour. That is a specific cut that permanently locked his name into diesel history.
So AJ Sour became the popular face of the strain, but we need to make sure the listener is aware that it wasn't the only famous face.
Crucially, yes. We have to distinguish between AJ's cut and the ECSD, the East Coast Sour Diesel. The ECSD was a separate critical keeper cut, often nicknamed the Chaco cut.
The Chaco cut.
In grower lore, the ECSD is often regarded as the classic version. It was noted specifically for being distinctively slower to flower and having a more pronounced tartar, almost petroleum-like profile,
Compared to AJ's cut.
compared to AJ's cut, which was often considered faster and maybe a bit fruitier. This difference is why even today, when someone says sour diesel, what they've actually experienced can vary significantly.
It's a genetic identity crisis packaged into this massive commercial success. You have Weasel's foundational genetics, the renaming by JJ, the distribution power of the Albany Crew.
And then the popularization of these two distinct keeper cuts, AJ's Sour and the ECSD. It's less of a relay race and more of a complex three-dimensional chess game.
And the success was truly seismic. By the 2000s, sour diesel wasn't just a strain, it was the East Coast calling card. Let's talk about that commercial value, those $500 prices. What did that mean for the NYC market?
That value was absolutely transformative. It reflected a couple of things: scarcity, perceived quality, and the cost of risk in an illicit market. $500 for an ounce set a gold standard.
Sent a message.
It told the world that the East Coast product was valuable, desirable, and could stand toe-to-toe with anything coming out of Amsterdam or California. The economic reward for hitting that sour D profile was massive.
And that status quickly moved from the street into pop culture. The cultural footprint is it's undeniable.
Exactly. It transcended the grower community. It became a shorthand for quality.
Yeah.
And we see these specific nods across music and media that confirm its legendary status.
Just looking at the sources, it's everywhere. Zayn released a track on Sour Diesel in 2018. Kenny Green did one in 2008, and a Sour Diesel 2 in 2019.
And Dame Grease featured it in a track with NORE and Styles P way back in 2007.
And the lyric nods reinforce that status. You see ASAP Mob shouting it out in Trilla and the Flatbush Zombies in Face Off.
But the real sign of mainstream saturation is when it reaches network comedy. It even got the TV treatment in Broad City. It went from a regional code word to a national pop culture reference.
So given how famous the ECSD became, there was this intense demand to stabilize that clone-only line and turn it into a reliable seed line.
That's the ultimate technical challenge. A clone-only line means you're trading convenience for stability. To get a seed, you need to create an inbred line, an IBL, that accurately reproduces the original.
So why is an IBL so vital for a clone-only strain like this?
Because clones offer zero genetic variation, but they're logistical nightmares to move around. An IBL aims to breed a strain back onto itself over multiple generations until it becomes stable enough that, say, 90% of the seeds produce plants that look, smell, and perform just like the mother clone.
It's how you democratize a legend.
Precisely. And the key effort here, according to the sources, came from ResDog's Sour Diesel IBL by Reservoir Seeds.
And how did that go?
Well, the project was marketed as the perfect representation of sour diesel. And while it was incredibly popular praised for delivering dank phenos that really tasted like the original, it was highly controversial.
And the controversy wasn't just about the taste or the lineage claims, was it?
No. The most damaging criticism, which the sources note was persistent, was the high rate of herm issues, hermaphroditism. For a commercial grower, herm issues are catastrophic.
It ruins the whole crop.
It means the plant can spontaneously develop male flowers, pollinate itself, and you end up with seeds instead of seedless flower. It's a disaster.
So after all the chaotic accidents of the 90s produced this perfect clone, the attempt to bring scientific order to it resulted in instability that made it a nightmare for a new generation of growers. That's almost poetic.
It really is. The journey from a few exchanged seeds and a simple New York slang flip to a global genetic powerhouse is one defined by instability and cultural propulsion. It highlights that the real value in these stories isn't necessarily having a perfectly clean ancestry. It's in understanding the pivotal cultural decisions, the distribution infrastructure, and the massive commercial impact that chaos created.
So what does this all mean? The sour diesel story is a perfect example of how cultural forces that shift from chem to diesel and localized distribution networks, the genius of the Albany Crew, can be just as important to a strain's success as the original genetics laid down by someone like the Weasel.
It's a synthesis of science, geography, and slang,
all colliding in the high-pressure environment of 1990s New York.
And that leads to a provocative thought for you, the listener. Given the inherent lineage instability, the controversy over the IBL, and the fact that its entire genesis was described by some of its creators as a series of mistakes, what does this ultimately say about the nature of truly legendary genetics? Perhaps the perfect, most defining strain is one that, by its very nature, resists being perfectly contained or stabilized, ensuring it remains elusive, difficult to replicate, and consequently eternally legendary.